This video presentation will discuss several types of equitable remedies, specifically rescission and specific performance, both of which are potentially available following a breach of contract between parties. We will examine several cases to illustrate how the courts applied each remedy in their final rulings. Contributors to this presentation include Lauren Offerman, Matthew Skiles, and Luke Wabrowitz.
First thing that we're going to talk about is rescission. As the slide says, it's essentially the cancellation of a contract. It can be unilateral or bilateral. Basically meaning unilateral, it can be canceled by one of the parties for one reason or another. If it's bilateral, it means both parties mutually agree to nullify the contract, which is much easier. The courts can also use this term to describe that it was nullified based on public policy, but it pretty much means the same thing. We're going to talk about is specific performance, which is essentially the exact opposite of rescission. It basically just means that the contract was fulfilled by one or both parties, depending on how the contract was written up. It's mostly used in contract law, like I said, just saying that the contract was completed. It can also be used in court if somebody does not fulfill their part of the contract. The court can issue this, effectively ordering the party in question to complete their part. It's also used when it comes to paying damages to a person ordered in court, things like being sued, and then other damages in criminal court when somebody's charged. How do they compare? They're basically the two ways to end a contract. It's either fulfilling it by choice or court order, or the contract is made null and void through one or both parties, which can happen for a number of different reasons. Due to them being so important, these terms anyway, they're very commonly used and probably some of the most commonly used, and they're important to know for somebody who is looking at dealing with contracts.
Our first example will discuss how the equitable remedy of rescission was applied in the case of Sherwood v. Walker.
All right, my name is Lauren, and I'll be explaining Sherwood versus Walker and how one of the nation's first rescission cases involves a cow. So Walker is a farmer, and he has a cow named Rose who cannot produce milk or have babies. So on the belief that she is barren, he agrees to sell her for meat for $80 to Sherwood. After signing the contract, Walker realizes that Rose actually is pregnant, so she isn't barren at all. So now her worth is 10 times more than the $80 that was originally offered. Alright, so Walker and Sherwood shared the mutual mistake of believing that Rose was infertile. This was a large point of the contract as she was to be used for meat. Upon learning that she was pregnant, she's no longer the cow from the original contract. So Walker rescinds his contract, wanting to keep his cow after learning she's pregnant. Now we determine if the contract between Sherwood and Walker is void. So Walker decides to sell his cow for the primary fact that she's barren. He would have kept her if she was fertile. So upon learning that she's pregnant, he wishes to keep his cow. And the court rules that the contract is void due to the change of circumstances that she'll no longer be sold for meat. So Walker had the right to rescind, and he does end up getting to keep Rose.
Our second case will examine how specific performance was applied during bankruptcy proceedings that involved a sales contract for real property. Emily Oon and Vesna entered into a real estate purchase contract in which Vesna planned to subdivide land into residential building lots. This required city approval since the land was originally zoned as pasture land. Vesna pursued city approval, but the court found that Emily Oon interfered with the process. She later claimed the contract was void since it violated the city's building code. Due to various circumstances surrounding COVID-19, Emily Oon entered Chapter 11 bankruptcy before the contract was closed. Vesna sued for breach of contract and sought relief in the form of specific performance and damages for the costs associated with improvements and maintenance to the land. The court ordered specific performance to facilitate city approval of the subdivision. The equitable conversion doctrine holds that when parties enter into a sales contract that is subject to specific performance, the equity court will regard the seller as a kind of trustee who holds legal title, but only for the purpose of performing the contract by conveying to the buyer. In this case, the seller's obligation was to convey legal title to Vesna, who already held the property's equitable title. In conclusion, we described how specific performance can force all or part of the original contract's terms, as well as how rescission enables parties to return to their original positions prior to contract formation. These equitable remedies are most used where damages may not be appropriate for the specific circumstances. A list of references used for the creation of this video can be seen on the next slide.